Before we dive into tonight's tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want more creepy stories that will keep you up at night. I never wanted to believe in curses. Superstition has no place in medicine, and I've spent my whole life clinging to logic like a lifeline. But the deeper I dig, the harder it is to ignore the patterns, the whispers, the things I can't explain. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I'm a medical investigator. Officially, I deal with fraud, malpractice, and unexplained deaths. Unofficially, I'm chasing ghosts, tracing a cold case that started long before I was born. My grandmother was a forensic pathologist, one of the best in her field. In 1976, she vanished without a trace. No body, no witnesses, just a string of cryptic journal entries left behind, filled with fragmented warnings and the same name appearing again and again, Charity Hospital. She wrote about souls that don't rest, about a hospital that consumes those who dig too deep. She was a woman of science, not folklore. So whatever she saw, whatever pulled her into the abyss that night, she believed it was real. And now, I'm here, standing in the same place she stood nearly 50 years ago. The hospital was abandoned after Hurricane Katrina, but some places don't stay dead. Rumors say it's still operational, off the books, hidden beneath layers of red tape and forgotten history. The right people can still get inside. The wrong people never come out. I'm not the first to look into this place, but I might be the last. Because the closer I get, the more I feel it watching me. The more I hear things in the silence. There are rules here. I don't know who wrote them, but they're posted in the staff lounge, carved into the walls, whispered in the hallways like a prayer. I've learned them the hard way. The rules. Rule 1, never open the morgue drawer marked with a red X. Rule 2, if you hear 3 consecutive whispers, immediately close your eyes and count to 13. Rule 3, do not acknowledge any reflections that appear out of sync with your movements. Rule 4, when the analog clock stops between 3:17 and 3:22 a.m., remain absolutely silent. Rule 5, if a patient's chart appears written in a language you don't recognize, do not attempt to read it. Rule 6, always leave exactly 2 drops of saline solution on the windowsill before your shift ends. I used to think rules like these were just urban legends, old superstitions passed down from burnt-out doctors and sleep-deprived nurses. But I've been here long enough to know better. These aren't just rules, they're survival tactics. And tonight, I have a feeling I'm going to need them. Hospitals are supposed to be places of order, sterile, controlled environments where science dictates reality. But here, in the underbelly of Charity Hospital, reality is something else entirely. It shifts, breathes, watches. I don't know how long I've been walking these halls tonight. Time feels different here, stretched thin like old film. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, flickering just slightly out of sync with my footsteps. The morgue is colder than the rest of the hospital. Not just cold, wrong. It's the kind of chill that settles in your bones, like the air itself has weight. The industrial freezer hums in the background, but it doesn't quite drown out the silence. I'm not alone down here. Jackson, one of the night staff, is standing by the morgue drawers, flipping through a clipboard. He looks tired, deep, soul-crushing exhaustion written into the slump of his shoulders. "This place'll kill you," he mutters, not looking up. "Already working on it," I reply. It's a half joke, but it doesn't land. Jackson exhales sharply, rubbing his eyes before tapping the clipboard. "Got a John Doe coming in. Need to log him." I nod and step back. I'm here to observe, to document, not interfere. He moves to the wall of stainless steel drawers, running his fingers along the labels. The overhead light buzzes, casting a sickly yellow glow over the metal doors. And then he stops. There's a red X scratched into the surface of one of the drawers. The mark is crude, almost frantic, like someone scraped it in with a scalpel. I feel my stomach knot. Jackson. My voice is quieter than I want it to be. "Don't," but he doesn't hesitate. His fingers curl around the handle, and before I can stop him, he pulls the drawer open. For a second, nothing happens. The body inside is wrong. The skin is papery thin, stretched taut over bones that seem too sharp, too elongated. The face is sunken, jaw unhinged as if caught mid-scream. But that's not what makes my breath catch in my throat. It's the veins. They glow. Iridescent, pulsing beneath translucent skin, mapping an anatomy that shouldn't exist. The patterns twist and shift as if moving independently, spreading like roots seeking something unseen. Jackson stumbles backward, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His hands shake violently. He turns to me, and that's when I see it. His skin is changing. The wrinkles around his eyes smooth out. His stubble fades. His features soften, not just in expression but in structure. He's shrinking. His lab coat hangs looser by the second, sleeves swallowing his arms. His hands, too small now, clutch at his face, his fingers pressing into his own cheeks like he's trying to hold himself together. "Elena," he chokes out. His voice is higher now, thinner. He keeps shrinking. His shoes slip off his feet. His hair darkens, curls forming where there were none before. His eyes wide, panicked, are the eyes of a child. I step back, my throat closing. Jackson is barely standing now. His knees buckle under the weight of his own clothes. His ID badge clatters to the floor. He looks up at me, and then the veins crawl toward him. The pulsing, iridescent roots spill from the open morgue drawer like living tendrils, stretching across the tile in slow, deliberate movements. Searching. Jackson tries to speak, but the words don't come. He's too small now, barely more than a child, his breath coming in short, terrified gasps, and then the light flickers. When it stabilizes, the drawer is closed. Jackson is gone. Only his empty lab coat remains, crumpled on the floor like a discarded husk. I don't breathe. The silence is deafening. And then, a small, childlike whisper echoes from inside the morgue drawer. "Elena?" I run. I don't know how long I sit in the stairwell after Jackson vanishes. My legs feel weak, my hands clammy and numb against the cold railing. The air is thick, suffocating, but I can't bring myself to move. Hospitals aren't supposed to work like this. Reality isn't supposed to work like this. But I have a job to do. I force myself to stand. My knees feel unsteady, but I push through, swallowing the nausea crawling up my throat. The morgue is behind me now, but I don't feel safer. Because something else is coming. I feel it before I see it, the shift in the air, the sudden absence of sound. I stop walking, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant chatter of nurses, the muffled beeping of heart monitors, gone. I glance at the analog clock on the hallway wall. The second hand isn't moving. 3:17 a.m. My breath catches. Rule 4. When the analog clock stops between 3:17 and 3:22 a.m., remain absolutely silent. I do not move. My heart pounds in my ears, each beat deafening in the unnatural stillness. The hallway ahead is lined with patient rooms, their doors cracked open just enough to see inside, and that's when I notice the shadows. At first I think it's a trick of the light, the way the dim overhead bulbs stretch the silhouettes of IV stands, bedside tables, and the patients themselves. But then I see it. They're moving, not flickering, not shifting with the angle of the lights. Moving on their own. I stare, unable to look away as the shadows stretch and pull away from the bodies that cast them. They detach, peeling away from the floors and walls like ink bleeding into water. The patients remain asleep, unaware. Some stir slightly, restless, but they don't wake. The shadows begin to drift toward each other. My pulse slams against my ribs, but I keep my breathing steady, my jaw clenched so tightly it aches. They merge, twisting together like smoke, growing darker, denser. The shape they form isn't random, it's deliberate. It's stitching itself together. The writhing mass takes on shape, limbs forming, a torso stretching upward like something assembling itself from the inside out. The darkness moves unnaturally, shifting in ways that don't make sense, as if it's obeying laws I can't comprehend. And then I see the thread. Thin, shimmering strands weave through the darkness, threading the shadows together. The stitching tightens, pulling the form into something grotesquely human-like, long-limbed, hunched, its head tilting in slow, jerky movements. I squeeze my eyes shut. I can't make a sound. I won't. The entity stirs. The stitched-together shadows ripple like breathing fabric, a barely there whispering sound emanating from the mass. It doesn't have a face, but I know it's looking at me. The silence stretches. Then, just as suddenly as it started, sound crashes back into existence. A distant IV pump beeps. The clock ticks. 3:22 a.m. I suck in a sharp breath. I don't look back. I walk. And when I pass the patient rooms again, the shadows are exactly where they should be. Nothing out of place. But the thin, shimmering thread, still there. I don't remember walking to the isolation ward. My body moves on autopilot, my mind still reeling from what I just witnessed. The weight of the rules presses against my skull, each one a silent warning. I shouldn't be here, but something pulls me forward. The isolation ward is kept separate from the rest of the hospital. A long, dimly lit corridor with only a handful of rooms, each sealed behind thick glass and heavy, sterile air. These patients aren't here for routine care. They're here because no one knows what's wrong with them. Tonight, only one room is occupied, room 407. I don't know the patient's name. Their chart is clipped to the door, but I don't reach for it. Something about the paper feels wrong, like it's humming under the fluorescent lights, waiting for me to make a mistake. Instead, I look through the glass, and my breath catches. The patient is awake, lying perfectly still on the hospital bed. Their skin is changing. Not in the way I've seen before, not like necrosis, not like infection. Something else. Parts of their body are turning to ash. I don't mean dry, flaking skin. I mean actual weightless ash, crumbling away from their arms, their chest, dissolving into the sheets like burnt paper. And yet, other parts are growing. Their left shoulder has erupted with jagged, crystalline structures, sharp and delicate like fractured glass. The formations pulse with a strange, iridescent sheen, reflecting colors I don't have words for, colors that feel wrong in my brain, like I'm seeing beyond the spectrum of human vision. The contrast is impossible. Decay and creation, death and birth. The patient's eyes snap to mine. I freeze. Their pupils are dilated, their gaze glassy, but I know they see me. Their lips part slightly, a shallow breath escaping. Then, a small piece of them falls off, a chunk of their forearm, right at the border where ash meets crystal. It drops onto the bed, soundless. Instead of blood, there's only more growth. A new crystalline branch unfurls in its place, blooming like a flower in fast forward. The patient exhales again, a dry, rattling sound. I step back. The chart shifts. I hear it, even though I never touched it. A whisper of paper, a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. I don't look. I turn on my heel and walk away, each step controlled even. I don't run, because something tells me if I run, whatever's in that room will think I'm part of the process. And I don't want to know what happens next. The halls are quieter than usual. Not the comforting kind of quiet. The absence of ringing phones, beeping monitors, and the murmur of late-night nurses chatting. No, this is wrong. Like the building is listening. I'm halfway to the nurse's station when the intercom crackles to life. The sound is sharp, sudden, static bleeding through the speakers overhead. My shoulders tense, but I don't stop walking. It's not uncommon for the system to act up. Charity Hospital is old. The wiring is older, but then I hear it. At first, it sounds like a normal page, garbled, distorted, but still following the same cadence as an announcement. A male voice, deep, calm, murmuring something I can't quite make out. The words almost sound familiar, but they slide through my brain without sticking, like a language I used to know in a dream. Then, the voice shifts. It grows softer, feminine, almost pleading. The words change too, no longer structured like an announcement. It's a conversation now, or rather, pieces of one. Fragments, overlapping and tangled, jumping between speakers like a radio tuning through different frequencies. I slow my steps. One voice murmurs something in what sounds like French, but the cadence is wrong. Stretched, broken in places, like the speaker forgot how the words should sound. Another voice cuts in, lower, raspier. Speaking English, but too fast, almost frantic. Can't move, oh God, it's still here, The voice distorts, swallowed by static. A third speaker joins. This one is laughing. Soft, breathless chuckles that echo too close to the microphone like someone standing inches away. Then the wet sound begins. I stop walking. It's subtle at first, like the rustling of damp fabric, the shift of something slick against metal. Then it grows louder, rhythmic, a slow, deliberate inhale, then a pause, then exhale. The breath is thick, wet, like lungs filled with fluid, like something is struggling to breathe from inside the walls. It doesn't stop. The sound repeats, steady and deliberate. It moves from speaker to speaker, traveling down the hall, closer. I stare at the intercom above the nurse's station, the tiny red light still blinking. And then, directly overhead, in a voice that is no longer fragmented, no longer distorted, it breathes in and says my name. I don't think. I reach over and slam my palm against the speaker grill, like I can physically stop the sound from escaping. My fingers come away damp. The static cuts off. Silence. But the speaker is still warm. like something was just breathing through it. I wipe my hand on my scrub pants and keep walking, because I don't have time to acknowledge what just happened, and because I know, the moment I do, it'll happen again. I don't know why I do it. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's the way the air feels heavier tonight, pressing down like something unseen is watching, waiting. Or maybe it's just curiosity, that stupid, nagging part of my brain that pushes me to dig, to uncover, to understand, even when I shouldn't, even when I know better. I'm in the East Wing when I find it. The door is tucked away at the end of a narrow hall just past the last row of patient rooms. No signs, no labels, just a heavy metal door with no handle. But it's open, barely, a crack of darkness just wide enough to catch my eye. A gust of cold air leaks through. I don't report it. I should. I don't. Instead, I wedge my fingers into the gap and pull. The hinges groan, stiff with age, and the smell hits me immediately. Sterile, damp, something else beneath it, something organic. The stairwell beyond is unlit, just cold concrete steps vanishing into the dark. I pull out my phone, flick on the flashlight, and descend. The first thing I notice is the silence. Hospitals are never truly quiet. There's always the hum of fluorescent lights, the distant murmur of voices, the rhythmic beep of machines. But down here, nothing. The second thing I notice is the walls. They aren't bare concrete like I expected. They're lined with glass, rows of glass cases. I move closer, angling my flashlight, and my stomach twists. Specimens, preserved in fluid, rows and rows of them, lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Some are small, jars of malformed organs, diseased tissue samples. Others are larger. I step forward. My reflection distorts against the glass. My breath fogs the surface. The thing inside the case is human, mostly. A torso suspended in fluid, skin translucent, rib cage split open to reveal something not quite right. The organs inside are wrong, misaligned, stretching past the boundaries of normal anatomy. And the face, its eyes are open. A low creak sounds behind me. I whip around, heart hammering. No one there, just rows of glass. I swallow hard, turning back to the case. And that's when I see it. The thing inside is looking at me. I know it wasn't before. The pupils are dilated, the mouth slightly open, as if it just took a breath. I take a step back, another creak. This time, I don't turn around, because I see the reflection. Not mine, theirs. Dozens of them, some partially formed, others looking too human, too familiar. Their eyes tracking my every movement. I don't remember leaving, only the feeling of cold air rushing past as I run, and the sickening realization that behind the glass, they were trying to move. I don't go back to the tunnels. Not after what I saw. But that doesn't mean the hospital is any less wrong. I tell myself I just need a break. Something normal. Something that doesn't involve shadows stretching the wrong way or things behind glass that shouldn't be moving. The staff break room is small, tucked behind the nurse's station on the second floor. It's nothing special. Beige walls, a humming vending machine, a battered couch that probably should have been thrown out a decade ago. It's empty when I step inside. I flick on the light, exhaling slowly. Normal. That's all I need. A moment of normal. I grab a cup from the counter, pour myself some stale coffee, and lean against the table. That's when I see them, the photographs. They're arranged along the far wall, framed and dust-covered, decades of staff portraits. At first, I barely glance at them. They're the kind of thing you see in every old hospital. Doctors in stiff white coats, nurses in pressed uniforms, groups of tired, smiling faces from another era. I sip my coffee, and then I notice something strange. The older photos, the ones from the 40s and 50s, look wrong. Not at first glance. At first, they just seem faded, the way old photos do. But when I look closer, the faces, they're off. The expressions seem frozen, too stiff. The eyes too dark, like the ink sank too deep into the paper. I step closer. One of the nurses in a 1952 portrait is looking away from the camera. Her head is tilted slightly, her gaze directed toward the left. I blink. That's not right. They're posed, all of them. The entire group should be facing forward. I look at the next frame, a photo from 1961. This time, two people are looking away. Their heads turned slightly, their eyes focused on something outside the frame. My stomach twists. I move down the line, scanning each year. More and more faces are turned. By the 1980s, half the staff in every portrait isn't looking at the camera anymore. They're all turning toward the same direction, the same point. I don't know why. but my hands feel cold. I step back, suddenly aware of how quiet the room is. The fluorescent light buzzes overhead, my coffee is cooling in my grip, and the moment I look back at the wall, every single face and every single photograph is looking at me. I drop the cup. The crash is deafening. Coffee splatters across the floor, the counter, my shoes. I don't move. My eyes are locked on the frames. The mouths, they're open, silent, wide, like they're screaming, a flicker, a trick of the light, or something else. I step back. The light overhead flickers. My reflection in the glass shifts, and for just a second, I swear I see someone standing behind me. I don't turn around. I leave the room without looking back. I don't go back to the break room. I don't talk about what I saw. I just keep my head down and keep working. That's what I tell myself anyway. But something's changed. The hospital feels different. It's always been unsettling, but this is worse. It's like the walls are listening, like the air is thicker, the lights dimmer than they should be. I catch myself holding my breath in certain hallways, like I'm waiting for something to move. I try to ignore it. Then I find my grandmother's name in the records. It happens by accident. I'm in the archives, buried in paperwork, sifting through old patient files, searching for something unrelated, when I see it. Rodriguez Cilia, my grandmother. She wasn't a patient, she was staff. My hands tighten around the folder. She was here. She worked here. She never told anyone. I flip through the pages, my pulse pounding. The records are incomplete, fragmented, like someone tried to erase them but didn't quite finish the job. I scan the dates. That's when she vanished. A note is scrawled in the margin, barely legible. Transferred to research facility, pending further evaluation. There's no facility listed, no address, no next of kin, just a blank space where the information should be. I close the file. The room feels smaller. I shouldn't be here. I turn to leave, and that's when I see the walls. The archive shelves stretch high, packed with old medical records, stacked so tight they seem endless. But between them, the walls. They aren't walls. Not anymore. The paint is peeling back, curling away like dead skin. Beneath it, something wet glistens, dark and pulsing. I step back. The shelves groan. The entire room feels like it's breathing, and in that moment, it clicks. The hospital is alive, not just haunted, not just cursed. It's a living thing, a thing that consumes, not just bodies, knowledge, medical knowledge. Every doctor, every nurse, every researcher who's ever worked here, it's been learning from them, absorbing them. And my grandmother, she wasn't just investigating the hospital. She was part of its research, a subject, a case study, or maybe something worse. I hear something shift behind the shelves, a slow, wet sound. I don't turn around. I leave the archives fast, but I know I won't be able to leave the hospital. Not until I find out what happened to her. I don't know why I stop. I should have kept walking. I should have ignored it, just like the rules say. But I don't. Because in the reflection I see her. My sister, she shouldn't be here. She's not here. But in the glass, she's standing right behind me. I freeze. The mirror isn't like the others in the hospital. It isn't cloudy, warped, or cracked like most old hospital glass. It's too clear, like the surface of still water. And she's there. Not as I remember her, not exactly. At first glance, she looks normal. The same long, dark hair, the same tired but kind expression. But then I see it. The lines. Thin, surgical markings etched across her skin, dividing her body into precise anatomical sections. Her face is cut into perfect quadrants. Frontal bone, nasal cavity, mandible. Her neck is labeled down to the muscle fibers. The skin of her arms is translucent in some places, revealing the nerves underneath, branching like tree roots. I see the contours of her rib cage, the shape of her lungs, the delicate curve of veins wrapping around her heart. It's her, but it's not her. It's an anatomical study, a dissection, and she's looking right at me. I try to step back, but I can't. I can't breathe. She opens her mouth to speak, and I break the rule. I acknowledge her. I don't mean to. It's instinct, panic, horror, recognition. I whisper her name. The moment I do, the hospital moves. The floor lurches beneath me, like something shifting deep inside the walls. The hallway stretches, elongates, then contracts. The doors at the far end vanish. The walls begin to twist. The angles, they're wrong. Everything bends inward, spiraling in ways that don't make sense. The ceiling folds down, merging with the floor, turning the hallway into something closer to a throat, a tunnel lined with pulsing walls. The air grows thick, humid, like I'm standing inside a living lung. The fluorescent lights overhead flicker, then blink out entirely. I turn back to the mirror, but it's not a mirror anymore. It's a window into something else. And my sister, she's still there, still watching me, still dissected. But now she's smiling. I run. I don't know where I'm going. There are no more hallways, no more doors, just endless shifting passageways, curling into themselves like veins pulsing with a slow, sick rhythm. Somewhere behind me, I hear something wet uncoil. Something is waking up. I keep running. I don't know if there's a way out. I just know I can't stop. I don't know when I stop running, or maybe I never stopped. Maybe the hospital just caught up. Everything around me moves. The walls pulse like veins beneath skin. The floor isn't solid anymore. It gives slightly under my weight, like stepping on muscle. There are no more doors, no more halls, just flesh and something deeper, something vast. I can feel it watching, not with eyes but with something older, something that doesn't just see but knows. I try to move. I can't. I look down and I feel my breath catch. My feet, they're sinking. The floor is swallowing me, not all at once, slowly, inch by inch, like a body being absorbed into an operating table. I struggle, but it doesn't matter. The more I move, the more I sink. My hands shake as I reach for something, anything, to pull myself free, but the walls are shifting, folding, reshaping themselves with every second. There's nothing solid to hold on to. Then I hear it, the voices. Not just one, hundreds, thousands, a chorus of whispers, humming like the murmur of a crowded waiting room. I try to block it out, but I can't. They're not just around me, they're inside me. Their memories, their thoughts, their research, doctors, nurses, investigators, all the people who came before me, all the people who were consumed. I want to scream, I want to fight, but I can't. Because I understand now, this isn't death, this isn't even an ending, this is preservation. My body will remain intact, held in place like a perfectly preserved cadaver suspended in time. My flesh will not rot, my organs will not fail, because I'm still needed, I'm still useful. A living, thinking specimen. Another researcher in an endless study. I feel my skin harden, turning cold and waxy, like something stored in formaldehyde. My bones shift, stiffening into place. The whispers get louder. The hospital is reading me, learning me, recording everything I know, everything I've ever studied, everything I've ever touched, everything I am. And when it's done, when it's taken everything, it will wait. Until the next investigator arrives, until the next question is asked, until the next chapter begins. I open my mouth to scream, but no sound comes out, because I am archived, and research never ends. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more creepy stories. Stay safe, and see you in the next nightmare.